My name is Breannon Babbel, and I'm originally from the States, but came here to Glasgow to do my PhD 2.5 years ago. And I'm based in urban studies. My focus is really health policy within the department. Within Scotland, there are dramatic health inequalities, so much so that if you look at the most affluent males compared to the most deprived males, there's about a 12 to 14 year difference in life expectancy. On average, individuals in the most deprived areas spend about twice as much time in poor health than individuals in affluent areas, which translates to by the time affluent populations are starting to typically get sick as they get older, individuals in deprived areas are actually already dying. I'm looking at the specific role that primary care might play in addressing health inequalities, primarily because it's somewhat centered within the healthcare system as a whole. And so to kind of focus my research, I'm looking at GPs in particularly working in the most deprived areas of Scotland. And so collectively, if you look at the 100 most deprived practices in Scotland, there's an informal network known as the Deep End. And so my research is really looking at kind of the experience and constraints of the GPs that are working in these deprived areas, because not only are their patients typically sicker, but they're compounded with other additional problems such as the presence of often mental health illness and social problems such as addictions, lower income, lack of employment. And so it's a whole variety of problems their patients face. So I've done 23 interviews with GPs so far. If you look at the 100 most deprived practices, around 85 of them are located within the Glasgow area, and so there's quite a high concentration of deprivation within Glasgow. It's looking at the potential role GPs play in addressing health inequalities, but also potentially acting as patient advocates because they somewhat witness the experience of individuals living in deprivation that other people might not see. Individuals in deprived areas often have a different relationship with their GPs. Since they tend to be sicker, they might see their GPs more often. For example, one of the GPs I've spoken with, several of their patients have asked to have their GP act as a job reference. Just because of that, it's a difference in relationships. Primary care, in a sense, is ideal to potentially address health inequalities because it's a first point of contact within the health system. So if you're sick, who do you often go to first? Your GP. Who continually provides care for you? Your GP. And whether it's a bum knee or diabetes or asthma, is typically your GP you're going to go see. And so the role of GP is definitely, there's potential for addressing issues beyond just that individual patient encounter. So my research is really looking to see how GPs themselves view this role, and also to try and understand the experience of working in these very deprived areas, how GPs are coping with scarce resources. For individuals in very deprived areas who often have much higher need, there's not a reflection in more resources being invested. One of the potential outcomes in terms of policy for my research is trying to highlight this issue and hopefully maybe involve GPs more in the policy process because they provide kind of direct experience to what's going on in these very deprived areas. I think a better reflection of resources according to need. There's already adjustments for example, elderly populations because they tend to be sicker. But the problem in very deprived areas is these populations aren't reaching those ages. So a 50-year-old might have the health of a 70-year-old, but it's not reflected in terms of more resources. As a result, many of the GPs in very deprived areas have extremely challenging caseloads, reflecting resources so that care is delivered at its best where it's needed most. Through the 23 interviews that I've been doing, the majority of them have taken place at the GP's practice, just to make them convenient for the GPs themselves. And so I often try, especially since most of them are in Glasgow, I try and cycle to the GP surgeries. And I've been shocked at how few have had actually bike racks out in front. Just seeing the lack of places to lock your bike up has been an unexpected finding as I've done my research. I've not been compensating my GPs for their time, but in order to show appreciation, I've been taking cookies. Typically, the last few interviews I did have been pumpkin chocolate chip cookies, because being from the States, I like to bake with pumpkin a lot. I value, especially GPs in very deprived areas where they already have very constrained time as it is, that I appreciate them taking an hour or so to spend with me by bringing them cookies. So I've done quite a bit of baking in the last couple months, which was an unexpected outcome of doing my field work, but it's also helped keep me sane, I think.